You know how I do. Put it just brand new. Yeah, we on that brand new. You know how we do. Hey, hey, hey. Better give a bunch of brand new. Let's go. Got a stat, DJ and a stat 2. Stat 2.0. J-Jan. 여기저기 또 한 번은 내 time out of 10. 이제 머리 먹어 pack. So 하루가. Hey, yeah, we get that score water. Yeah. Pull up, let your block. We gon' knock. Yeah, as your little fella. Pop. Yeah, get back and forth. Mine, we don't stop. You know how I do. You know how I do. But it's just brand new. Yeah, I'm that brand new. You know how we do. Pop. Baby game to live, rock. Yeah, hit him up like pop. Hit him with the truth like rock. Trying to pay your debt. See me not. Let it be. Hit it. And it's split. Yeah. Pull up at your bar. We go knock. Yeah, at your little fella. Pop. Yeah, get back for what's mine. We don't stop. You know how I do. What's up brand new? Yeah, we on that brand new. You know how we do.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for showing back up after lunch, getting your meal. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker, who is Christopher Edwards. He is an associate professor with the University of Arizona College of Pharmacy, Department of Pharmacy Practice, and director of emergency clinical pharmacotherapy with the University of Arizona College of Medicine. He maintains a clinical practice in the emergency department of Banner University Medical Center in Tucson and has been an emergency medicine pharmacy specialist for over 15 years. Dr. Edwards has authored dozens of peer-reviewed papers, book chapters, and serves as co-editor for the textbook titled Basic Skills in Interpreting Laboratory Values, and as a lead editor for an upcoming textbook titled Foundations of Emergency Medicine Pharmacotherapy. He serves as deputy editor-in-chief for the Journal of Acute Care Pharmacotherapy. He has earned several awards for didactic and bedside teaching and leadership. Dr. Edwards serves as the inaugural chair of the Board of Pharmacy Specialists Council on Emergency Medicine. He currently serves as a member of BPS Council on Pain Management and as technical editor for the American Board of Emergency Medicine's Key Advances Certification Maintenance Program for all board-certified emergency medicine physicians. Dr. Edwards has been one of Arizona's delegates to the American Society of Health Systems Pharmacists House of Delegates for the past 6 years, and he currently serves on ASHP's Committee on Nominations for a section of Clinical Specialists and Scientists, Chair of Research for Arizona's Health Professionals for Climate Action, and board member at large for the Society of Emergency Medicine Pharmacists. He has previously served as chair of ASHP's Council of Education and Workforce Development and as president of Arizona State's affiliate chapter of ASHP. Please join me in welcoming Christopher.
All right. So how about that sim, huh? So after all that riveting sim, a delicious lunch, now the most exciting part of the day, we're going to talk about the Journal of Acute Care Pharmacotherapy. Thank you for that introduction. I appreciate it. It was way too long, but basically, I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be part of this journal. I'm honored to serve you guys as the deputy editor for this journal. Brian Gilbert is our editor-in-chief. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here today. So if you guys have any hard questions, that's Brian's department. Go ahead and email him about that. We have no financial disclosures related to content presented in this session. We don't make money off of this. We literally helped put together this journal so that we could launch a new era of acute care pharmacotherapy, as it says on the physical edition of the first copy of the Journal of Acute Care Pharmacotherapy, which was published January a few months back. Again, the editor-in-chief is Brian Gilbert. I'm serving as the deputy editor, and then Jimmy serves as the publisher and executive director, really helping to make sure that everything's formatted correctly, gets to the publisher on time, helping to keep those logistics flowing. The editorial team that we put together consists of several different groups of really important people. So when we were first developing the concept, and to this day, we still meet with our advisory board, which consists of some very well-known names from critical care, toxicology, and emergency medicine. Specifically, you know him, you love him, Frank. Told us all the things we were going to do that were stupid, which is very, very helpful. We also have two giants from critical care medicine, Brian Ersted and Judy Jacoby, both serving on this panel as well. They both have extensive experience with serving in editorial leadership roles and have been instrumental in helping us avoid some of the pitfalls that we can see. Along with Michael Gibbs, again, just lots of great guidance in terms of how to not screw this up. So we'll find a way then. Just give it time. We also have a number of very talented section editors that are specialists in their respective areas. So William Eggleton is our toxicology section editor. And in the next session, we'll talk a little bit more about what a section editor does as opposed to an associate editor, as opposed to sort of the higher level positions. So we'll get into the specifics of that. But again, we have a nice collection of experts in various areas adjacent to acute care, critical care, emergency medicine. So specifically, we tried to recruit people that would be able to provide, excellent insights into the quality of papers coming out for various aspects of those fields, and then also hopefully could use their networks in order to expand our peer reviewers, our author submissions, and things like that. So again, I mentioned William. Cedric Rutland serves as our pulmonary and critical care section editor for pre-hospital and disaster medicine. Amber Rice, who is medical director for several of the EMS agencies around Tucson, agreed to basically take any pre-hospital papers that we have. For peds, we have a couple of different editors. Kevin Allen is a physician, and then Nadia Awad is a pharmacist. And so for peds papers, I feel like we have a pretty good array of excellence there. Our man Ruben is in charge of digital scholarship. So anything relating to social media, digital scholarship, sort of alternative modes of distributing content, knowledge, things like that, falls on Ruben. He's doing a great job with all that. One of the things that we want to do that kind of differentiates us from some of the other journals that are out there is we really want to focus on an international population, right? We don't just want to be US centric. And so we have a section editor for international medicine, Dr. Lama Nazar is awesome. She's a critical care pharmacist from Lebanon, and again, just a wealth of knowledge and really enthusiastic and passionate about pharmacy practice. We also have a section editor for community emergency medicine. So David's been doing a great job in that role. So thank you. We have, again, a number of associate editors, and these guys are really the backbone of the journal. So the associate editors are the ones who, Brian or I will take a look at any submission, make sure that it, doesn't read like it was just output by ChatGPT. And then we assign a section, and then we assign the appropriate either associate or our section editor to basically do a little bit more thorough review, make sure that it passes muster and that it's not going to piss off our peer reviewers if they send it out for peer review. If it's absolute trash, they'll just do a bench reject at that point in time, right? If it's like, this was clearly written by AI or this has some really fatal flaw, the associate editor should catch that and say, okay, the buck stops here. But if it's good, the editorial team will then select some peer reviewers in order to send it out. So again, just like we mentioned with the section editors, the associate editors, we wanted to choose people that are well-respected experts in their field, have a network that they can tap into to help recruit peer reviewers. And again, these folks have been doing an amazing job on that. So why JACP? Why did we do this? Like, what are we trying to achieve with this? What is our goal? So there's a couple of things that we're really hoping to do. So again, I mentioned we wanted to have that international focus. And even though this is a product of SEMP and our focus is really emergency medicine, but we want to appeal to acute care pharmacists sort of across the spectrum of acute care. So it could be, again, everything from pre-hospital care, emergency care, critical care, discharging patients, transitions of care. Again, we want to cover that whole spectrum of acute care sort of across the globe. We want good research, right? We want rigorous research. We want things that are up to the methodologic quality that our readership is going to expect. In addition, we want practical insights, right? I think that's one of the things that pharmacists do really well is coming up with, you know, pearls and practical tips and 13 things that everybody should know about tox, things like that can really be helpful that may not be found in the literature, but can be really good to get out there in front of people. We also want to encourage reflective and narrative editorial pieces and things like that, that can really get to the complexity, diversity, and urgency of acute care. Again, so that's the why. And again, the mission really gets to that, right? So we're looking to publish in innovative, inclusive, and evidence-based work that improves care delivery and emergency, trauma, critical care, urgent care, and disaster response. To highlight a couple things here, though, we really do want to focus on that inclusivity. We want to focus on, making sure that voices are heard, even if they're often like marginalized. Sometimes there can be controversial topics that come up that other journals may not be as eager to publish on because of potential for like political backlash. You guys are our only bosses, right? So I don't think you guys are going to get mad if we publish a paper about, I don't know, how to take care of trans people in the ED, right? Because it's the stuff that you guys are seeing on a regular basis. We're aiming to be inclusive. We don't have to worry about pissing off, the federal government. We don't have to worry about pissing off our advertisers because we don't have those pressures, right? We are really only beholden to you guys. And so that allows us to be a little bit more innovative, a little bit more nimble, a little bit more inclusive than maybe some of our competitors. So again, focusing on that entire spectrum of acute care, we want submissions focused on emergency medicine, obviously, but also some of the pre-hospital stuff, critical care. We're taking a digital first approach. And again, if you stick around to the next session, we'll talk about sort of the difference in like timing of publications or manuscripts as they move through the process. But basically, we want to get our articles like through the editorial process, through peer review, and put online quickly. That's honestly good enough, right? So at that point in time, you can put it on your CV as an article that's been published. People can access it through the way that they're most likely to access it. And then when it comes to like the publishing of specific issues, where then your paper will be assigned an issue number and page numbers and all those things, that takes a little bit longer. And it's because we want to keep to a very strict release schedule, because that gets to our indexing things, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Speaking of indexing, so obviously our goal is to get indexed in Medline so that you can search for our articles in PubMed. In order to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success in that metric, we apply rigorous standards to every submission that comes through. So all articles undergo double-blinded peer review. And as you can see on our website, we have a strong commitment to ethical and scientific integrity. So again, the first edition was published December, January, and it had some really awesome articles in there. So if anybody here contributed to that first edition, thank you for your contributions. It really means a lot that we were able to get so many high quality submissions, particularly in that first edition. It's probably a little bit hard to see this from the back of the room, but a couple of the key articles from that edition were this paper on high-dose phenobarbital for severe alcohol withdrawal in the emergency department. They found that high-dose phenobarb manages severe alcohol withdrawal, reducing ICU length of stay and benzo use. So the really cool thing about that article is over 1,000 people have looked at that paper in 8 different countries around the world. And that's, again, just a few months of being available online. We're already starting to see the impact of that publication. So really awesome stuff. Another like really interesting paper from that first edition was this forgetting something. So they were looking at utilizing an automated pharmacy kiosk for discharged patients in the emergency department in order to reduce prescription abandonment rates. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about this paper is they actually showed a reduction in patient visits within 3 days. So it took a little bit longer to get patients out the door with med in hand, but it did show that those patients were less likely to come back within the next 3 days. That's the type of stuff that I love, right? I want to see things where it's like an innovative pharmacy practice where we can show a reduction in a metric that management cares about, right? Or in a metric that is going to have a meaningful outcome that the patient is going to care about. Those are the things that we really, really are looking for. That makes it easier for a pharmacist that wants to do this to justify setting something like that up in their shop. So that one's really, really great. They're all really great. Really excited about that first edition. We had a cool case report about a patient who was taking rizatriptan and topiramate, and they ended up having an acute angle closure glaucoma. And then sort of an interesting one. There was one paper in there about looking at the rate of hypersensitivity reactions when you push 4-factor PCC compared to slower administration, and it looked like it was fine. Which is, again, I love that stuff. Anything that makes our lives easier. We don't have to set up a pump and run our 4-factor in slowly. We can just push it. Like, that's great. Probably needs a little bit more data before that becomes widely adopted, but super interesting, data for sure. And then Brian Ersted submitted a paper to that first edition as well. And it's kind of one that like didn't really have a home somewhere else, but really went through sort of the early clinical uses of albumin, where it was initially studied as a blood substitute in World War II, all the way through till getting established a little bit more readily in critical in acute care. So again, sort of having that interesting historical perspective on things that you just don't really see elsewhere. I think there's value in that, and so it's really more of that narrative or reflective essay style. But again, I think there's value in getting that stuff out there because without it, those historical perspectives get lost, right? There's dozens of systematic reviews out there on albumin, but there's nothing out there that really gets into that history and really how we got to the point that we are today. So again, that was kind of an interesting and novel contribution. We recently published our second edition, which also super exciting. One of the articles that was included in that was this Action ADE. It was an alert system for electronic platforms that basically improve medication safety by providing real-time alerts about ADEs that occurred while the patient was in the hospital. And then they allow for everybody who takes care of that patient to know that occurred, enabling better interventions, both in the acute care setting and then follow up when the patient gets discharged. This was based on a poster, I think, that was presented here last year, and it was an invited submission to the journal. Unfortunately, for most of us in this room, this was in Canada. A little bit harder to implement this system in the US. But again, we want to have that international focus. We want to weigh in on all of that. Another one looked at weight-based dosing of vasopressors compared to non-weight-based dosing. Found no real difference in most outcomes, but it did show a reduction in hospital and ICU length of stay with weight-based dosing instead of non-weight-based dosing, which is I thought was really interesting. We do non-weight-based dosing at my shop, but this made me consider doing weight-based, particularly for patients who are a little bit outside the normal range. And then the last paper I'm going to talk about a little bit is on this page. Looked at using IV insulin lispro for treating hyperkalemia, but did see an increased risk of hypoglycemic events that still need to be studied a little bit further. There was another one looking at you guys be doing a lot of research on Kcentra, but like there was one looking at andexanet alpha versus 4-factor PCC, which we wanted to get out before it got pulled off the market, but yeah, basically just more data in support of Kcentra over andexanet alpha, and then looking at a stewardship program for factor products, specifically 4-factor PCC, showing an increase in appropriateness of use, which again can help justify similar type of types of programs around the world. So when looking at our 1 year impact, looking at what we've been doing and you know, uh, what we've been able to do in this first year, on average, it's taken us 72 days from submission to decision. We have a pretty high acceptance rate. A lot of these papers have been pretty darn good. About 89% of the papers that have been submitted have been accepted. We've got 33 total submissions as of a week or two ago when I updated the slide. So, we got 10 that are out there in an actual issue and a bunch more in the pipeline. So we should be in pretty good shape as we look ahead. So I think the big things moving forward are to continue the momentum, right? We've had a lot of submissions, we've had a lot of interest in the journal, and I think that we really want to keep that alive. I think one of the challenges with that is we are an open access journal, right? We're a pretty new journal. We don't have a big name. We don't have an impact factor. We're not indexed by Medline. And running a journal costs money. So we use this online platform called Scholastica. It costs a lot of money every year in order to continue to use that platform. And so the way that we're able to pay for that is through article processing charges or APCs. And we try to basically do it at cost for members, right? So it's $250 to submit an article if you're an SEMP member. If you're a non-member, it's $500. Again, we're not trying to get rich off of this. It's not going to line Jimmy's pocket or anything. Like it's literally, it's so that we can pay to use this website, right? Because Scholastica is expensive, but they do a really good job with things, and I'll go through why it's important to use that platform in just a second. So I'm a little bit worried that as we start to charge these article processing fees, that might kind of like decrease the number of submissions that we're getting because people are going to see that as a barrier. But again, we're really trying to keep those costs as low as possible, and it is just to cover our overhead for running the journal. And nobody's making money off of it. Nobody's getting paid to do this. It's just so Scholastica is getting paid, but that's pretty much it. So we did have a big milestone that happened last month, a couple weeks ago. We are assigned our ISSN through the Library of Congress. So we are officially on the books there, which is awesome. And thanks to Jimmy for continuing to hound people with those emails and make that happen. So good work there. The next steps are to get indexed in different search engines. All of them have different requirements, and they're all very weird and complicated. Nobody really knows how you get on Google Scholar other than having a presence on the internet, and then at some point they start indexing you. So from what I've been able to find online, it seems like that's usually the first one that gets picked up. So I anticipate that will probably happen in the next year or two as we continue to publish more articles and get a little bit stronger presence online. PubMed Central and Medline, they have more specific requirements. Obviously, that's the goal. We want to get indexed on Medline, and this is kind of what it looks like. So in order to be considered for indexing on Medline, we have to have a publication history of at least 3 years. You have to have at least 40 high-quality peer-reviewed articles that the people that basically give you the thumbs up or the thumbs down, they review those in detail in order to make sure that the papers that you published meet the rigorous standards that they put forward for a scientific journal. There's I think it's an international consortium of medical journal editors or something that puts forward the standards, and then Medline basically makes sure that you're meeting all of those standards. Anyway, they're going to look at details for our editorial board, our peer review process, all of our copyright policies, all the work that we've already put in on the front end, making sure that we're consistent and compliant with all of those things. That was a lot of the work that was done last year to kind of launch this. So we can check that box already. We should be in pretty good shape for the 40 high-quality peer-reviewed articles. We're on track to have that well before that 3-year mark, as long as we keep our publication volume about where it is. They want to see international representation for authorship and readership. So we've got our editorial board has quite a bit of international representation on there. Again, we've got folks from Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Australia, Canada, all serving on our editorial board. And so, again, we already have a pretty good international presence with plans to continue to expand that. So having people on the editorial board, again, just helps to get the word out. They're going to tell their friends, they tell 2 friends, they tell 2 friends. Before you know it, we have an international presence. they're going to want to see sample issues. So we're going to send them, I think, 3 or 4 sample issues that, again, they can look through and make sure that everything's up to snuff. And then this is where Scholastica really comes in. Another requirement for indexing is you have to meet the technical requirements of Medline in order for them to consider indexing you. Scholastica has successfully seen numerous journals through this process. They're good at extracting the metadata that Medline wants to see. They're able to basically, if we're publishing with Scholastica, it makes that process a lot easier because they can just check that box of like, yep, all of these technical requirements are met. I don't have to learn what all those technical details are because quite frankly, I don't care that much, right? I'd like the fact that like Scholastica just takes care of that. That's why we didn't just do some weird homegrown thing. Also, I think Scholastica, again, manages all of our submission process, our editorial assignments, our peer review process, everything to publishing and formatting, hosting, all of the content, and then again, putting all of this formatting and metadata requirements into something that Medline will like. So again, this is the goal. We're looking at about 3 to 5 years before we can get indexed on Medline. But when we do, we're going to celebrate real big at that EMPower. So with that, if you want to get involved, I would definitely recommend, consider submitting a paper. If you've got a resident manuscript that you've been sitting on for a little while, maybe you couldn't get in an AJHP. I'm not saying that our standards are lower, but we'd like to take a look at it, see if there's merits to it. Again, we do have a pretty good visibility. I'm actually a bit surprised at how many people are looking at our stuff. It's really cool to see the number of people that are opening, at least looking at the paper. Even if your paper doesn't get accepted in our journal, it probably will. But even if it doesn't, you'll get expert peer review. You'll get feedback that might help you improve it for your next submission. And again, we do turn them around pretty quickly. We do have a bunch of research-based resources available through the Society of Emergency Medicine Pharmacy. The research subcommittee did a great job last year of putting together this research toolkit that should be available on the website any day now. And then again, if you know somebody that's sitting on a paper, you got a resident that graduated last year and they haven't published their paper yet, send them our way. Like, tell them to submit it through JACP. I'd also recommend, if you're interested in getting involved on more of the back end stuff, more of the editorial side, or if you just want to learn how to be a better author, a better researcher, consider doing peer review for us. We offer some mentorship on that process. All of our editors are like open to providing feedback to the peer reviewers about how to do better peer review. And knowing how to do peer review helps you to better critically evaluate the literature. It helps you to write your manuscripts better because you can kind of look at it through the eyes of a peer reviewer. You know what they're going to call you out on before you even submit. And it's sort of that first step towards getting involved in that back end of editorial work and things like that. So definitely think about it. There's a sign up available via the website. Even if you don't know what you're doing and you're scared, let us know. We'll mentor you. It's fine. So with that, I'll take any questions you guys have about the journal. And if there's no questions, we'll just jump right into the workshop. But yeah. Yeah. Great question. Yeah. So the question was, even though we aren't indexed yet, when we get indexed, not if, when we get indexed in Medline, will that apply retroactively to previously published articles? And my understanding is that it does. Again, I've never taken a journal through this process before, but from what I've seen online, it does look like as long as the track record is very consistent in terms of the rigor of the editorial process and peer review process and all that kind of stuff, it should proactively apply. Yeah, no problem. That was your question? All right. Any other questions? I'm gonna do like I do in my class. So I got the next session too. We can take a little break, or we can power through. What do you guys want to do? Power through. All right, let's go. Oh, hell yeah, my man. All right, let's get that next one up. Let's go. All right. So, well, we're getting the slides pulled up here. Basically, this next presentation again was supposed to be me and Brian. Unfortunately, Brian couldn't make it, so I'm up here on my own. You guys got to put up with me for an hour and a half. I'm not wearing like too silly of a suit or nothing. Sorry, like not bringing the Brian Gilbert energy, but basically with this workshop, we're going to try to cover a lot of ground in a pretty short period of time. There are aspects of it that are interactive. So, again, definitely appreciate participation and all that. Okay. Oh, yeah. We got to make sure you guys get credit for that. So we're going to put the access code up and then we'll get going here in a second. All right. Code is up. 9242BB as in beta blocker. uh, Might as well get credit for this myself. Take a picture of that. All right. It's crazy that you don't just automatically get credit for CEs that you put on. Like, anyhow, so, oh, excellent. So, again, this workshop is designed to walk you through the process of designing a research project, writing a manuscript, doing peer review, responding to reviewer comments. So again, we're going to cover a lot of ground in a short period of time. Please feel free to stop me at any point and ask questions. Again, if I can't answer them, just email Brian Gilbert, text him if you have his number. So I don't have any financial disclosures related to this content either. These are the learning objectives that we're going to try to get through today. And let's start with the learning assessment. So what is PICO, P-I-C-O? So who thinks it's an acronym to help define a research question? That would be a very good guess based on the content of this lecture. It's pretty close to when somebody feels compelled to eat dirt. Might kind of sounds like a Pokemon, and I don't remember what they were talking about in the symposium yesterday. But when you're trying to design a successful project, the first thing to do is to have a very clear question in mind, right? So you want to keep the best research questions answer one very simple, basic question, right? And the more you try to expand from that, the more you're like, well, let's look at this, let's look at that, let's look at this, let's look at that. Now all of a sudden you've got this monster of a data set that you need 15 statisticians to figure out what to do with it, right? So if you can narrow that patient population, you want to define the population that you're looking at, you want to narrowly define the intervention that you're looking at, you want to know definitively what two groups are we comparing, right? Keep it simple, particularly early on. And what outcome are we going to compare? Again, the more you can keep it simple, the more likely you are to get that thing across the finish line. One of the mistakes that I made early on, like when I started doing research, you'd start to look at a patient population and you'd be like, yeah, we should look at, I don't know, so like cephalosporins versus everything else in uncomplicated cystitis. And then it's like, yeah, but what about pylo? And then what about like pregnant patients? And then what about this? And like, oh, maybe it decreases readmissions and maybe it looks at this and that and that. And then you end up like talking yourself into adding all of these different data elements and all these different outcome measures that take forever to pull out of the medical record. And then again, you end up with this database that's like impossible to try to sift through. So again, the more you can keep it simple, the better off you'll be. You also want it to matter, right? You want to look at something that is going to either like inform or change your practice, or look at something that that again is meaningful. These projects take a long time, right? Even little stupid retrospective projects take at least a year or two to generally get them done. That's a lot of hours. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of effort. Make sure that it's something that you care about. At some point, you're going to be like, oh my God, I'm tired of this project. I don't want to think about it anymore. If it's something that you care about, it makes it a little bit easier to power through those times where you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. So again, think about projects that you actually care about. Another thing that got me a lot early career is I'd have this great idea. I'd be like, oh hell yeah, we should definitely do a study on that. And then like you get pretty far down the planning phase and then you start writing up the background for it and you're like, oh shit, somebody else had this idea like 10 years ago. Like I'm not that smart. Oh man. And then you have like a whole existential crisis. It turns into a thing. But no. So, um, start pretty early on by looking to make sure like somebody else didn't already do this project, that there's not a ton of extra data that's already out there. Because obviously it makes it harder to get that published at the end of it. You're not really answering any questions if you do a retrospective project looking at something that just had a big RTC done on it, right? Or RCT. So if there's already a lot of data, maybe consider doing a systematic review or scoping review on the topic to try to compile that as a project instead of putting a lot of effort into collecting new data that doesn't really add a whole lot to the literature. So ideally, when you're starting out, you want to do that exhaustive literature review. If you're very early career, if you haven't done a lot of research, or if you're working with a student or resident, make sure you're mentoring them through this process. Because, I mean, let's be honest, man, these kids these days, like they're just gonna go to Chat GPT and be like, "Oh, what's the data behind this?" Maybe they'll go to Open Evidence if they're good. Like that's not a good search strategy, right? That's not a legit search strategy. Like mentor them through the process, show them how you would go about finding that information. Ideally, if it's particularly if you're doing a systematic review or scoping review, try to work with a librarian. Librarians are wild, man. Like I work with them every now and then on different projects, and like this lady, we're getting ready to do one. I'll just tell you, don't steal this, all right? We're already working on it. So basically, we're looking at how IV buprenorphine has been used at any point in time. Because like IV bup makes a lot of sense for like severe acute withdrawal. The doses that are out there are so low and so weeny that like I don't think they do anything. There's not a lot of data on this. So I was talking to a librarian about like doing a scoping review on basically IV buprenorphine. And she's like, yeah, it's going to take me 2 weeks to design the search strategy. I'm like, 2 weeks, man? Like, I think the most time I ever put into that was like 3 minutes. Like, what are they doing? But like, she was saying that like they'll go through and like if we're looking at IV bolus doses of buprenorphine, she'll find 20 different ways to say that and include all of that in the search term. So they got skills, man. Like they have a whole degree. It's a whole field of science that I don't know that much about. So if you can work with a librarian, particularly if you're doing a systematic review, scoping review, definitely try to engage those folks. Banner Health has one that has a department for our health system. Your health systems might have that as well. Obviously, do more than just Google search, PubMed, Google Scholar, all that kind of stuff. And then once you've identified some articles, try to look through their citations to keep digging a little bit deeper. And then also you can look at the search terms that they used in order or that they applied to their article. Maybe that's a little bit different than the search strategy that you were initially using. You might find some new mesh terms or something like that that you could use in your strategy as well. So little tips might help. Again, with the lit review, you kind of want to start really broad and find as much as you can. And then as you're figuring things out and kind of zeroing it in a little bit, you can narrow the focus. How many of you guys use reference management software? Who uses EndNote? One guy. Damn, you're like the lone man on the island there. Who uses Zotero? Yeah. All right. What do you guys use? Who didn't? Didn't work? Oh man. So I like Zotero. I don't make any money off of them or anything, but it's free. It has extensions for most browsers and stuff. You can just download it and then you click a button for whatever web page you're on, whatever PDF you're looking at. It like automatically creates a citation. And then there's another plugin for Microsoft Word or Google Docs, and you just click that button and then it automatically puts it in. EndNote does something similar. It's just more complicated, I think. Nice. That's awesome. They taught EndNote in school. I like that a lot. Yeah, highly recommend that. If you've ever like last minute had to put together or modify a bunch of citation numbers because you had to move a paragraph for a reviewer and stuff, you'll know the value in using reference management software because it's terrible. It's like the worst part, man. So yeah, reference management software early on, super, super helpful. Yeah. Oh man, when it just fills out your whole reference list for you. Oh, it's awesome. It's so gratifying. All right. Any questions on the literature review, reference management software, anything like that? Cool. Yeah. We should chat because I'm curious what's up. Yeah. Yeah, let's do it, man. Yeah, I downloaded it and it worked pretty smooth. Like, so maybe it's a compatibility thing. Like, it could be like you're using a weird browser or something. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. So we'll one of those Miami browsers. I don't know. I don't want to know what you're looking up, brother. Like, anyhow. So yeah, reference management software, whatever you like, whatever your team likes too. I would say if you're working with a group of people on something, ask them early on, like, hey, what do you guys like to use? Because you can actually share libraries with some of the software as well. If you got one person using EndNote, one person using Zotero, it might get a little bit sloppy. But yeah. Anyhow, so moving on. Maybe, maybe not. All right, this thing is working. Anyhow, cool. All right, here we go. So the next step is, and this is something that I think is really critical. And again, something I've screwed up a lot early on. It's real easy to get carried away with the data that you want to collect, right? So the first thing is obviously you want to think about like, how are you going to do this project? What resources do you have available? What data can you like reasonably get? Is this something you can run a report on and extract a lot of that data from your database? Is it coming out pretty clean? Or is it something you're going to have to send a resident in, or you're going to have to go in and manually abstract every single data element, right? So again, knowing what data elements you have available can be really, really helpful as you start to design projects. Good example of this, when I first started out, there was a physician who kept he basically, anytime somebody got tube in our department, this dude, John Sackles, had his airway form and he had the resident fill it out and put it in his box, right? And then the airway form had all this different data on there about, patient population, like what devices were used, what tube size was put in, induction agents, post intubation, hemodynamic instability. And that airway registry that he built led to like a ridiculous number of publications out of that, right? And so we collaborated with that guy on a number of different publications looking at RSI stuff because it was available, right? Find out what people are doing in your shops. Find out what data is available, particularly stuff that's unique, particularly anything that's like not, maybe isn't done everywhere else. Like those are your key opportunities for designing a cool project. Then as you're thinking through what data you want, really think about what do you need? Like my second research project that I did as a resident, like I was working with an ID guy, brilliant dude. The data collection form, this was back in the day, it was manual data collection form paper, was 8 pages long. And like we were answering a very simple question. It was like, there's this thing called PNA fish, or fluorescent in situ hybridization, that allows you to like identify, we were looking at Enterococcus species and trying to identify them a little bit earlier. Anyhow, all we wanted to know was like time to antibiotics. If patients who had this testing done got on appropriate antibiotics sooner. And like if I was to redesign that project today, I would have like maybe 12 variables, right? But again, we had 8 pages. We were looking at like all these different risk factors for like, antibiotic exposure for like 3 years before and after, all this crazy stuff. And I think he was just trying to build a database so that he could analyze it for different things. But it ended up taking so long to get that data that project, almost flopped. It was ridiculous. So basically, you want enough data to describe your patient population. You want to be able to answer the questions that you want to answer, your primary question, any secondary outcomes that you're looking at. You want to think through any confounders. Is there anything else that could explain the results that you're finding? And then really think about like, okay, what else are we going to get, and how am I going to analyze that data? I can't tell you how many data elements I've seen residents collect that we just don't ever do anything with. We never even report them out in the manuscript because like they're not really, can't really analyze them. There's not really a lot to do with it. Like, maybe we could do some crazy, logistic regression analysis or multivariate regression thing, but like really we're just basically, a lot of times we're doing pretty simple stats, a chi-square or a t-test on the primary outcome variable, descriptive statistics for the population, and then going from there. And you don't need to collect 8,000 variables to do that, right? So the more you can really think through everything that you need and everything that you and eliminate the things that you don't need, that makes it so you can really get that data a lot faster, particularly if you're doing manual extraction. So again, the time you spend here is going to pay dividends later on. The more time you can spend really thinking through up front, like what elements you absolutely need. Don't overdo it on this, like slimming this down either, right? The worst thing you can do is get to the end and be like, like I got to go back and look at 1,000 patients because I forgot to get this one stupid variable. That's what's going on with this guy I was telling you about earlier. We're doing another study looking at AKI incidents in older patients with trauma, blah, 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 blah. And the resident that was working on it didn't collect Vanco or Zosyn utilization, even though he was supposed to. And so we got like thousands of patients worth of data, and I got like a couple students going back and looking through like, hey, just flag it if they got Vanco. It's like, oh, we're so close. But anyway, so yeah, spend time here. Make sure that the resident knows what data they're supposed to be collecting, even if it's very clearly spelled out in his form. I'm not bitter, but anyhow, so really, really, really spend a lot of time thinking about that. The other thing you want to think through is, again, what are you going to do with that data? What is your statistical analysis plan? It's really easy to just say like, oh yeah, we'll use descriptive statistics for any demographic variables, and then we'll use theta for all of our calculations or whatever. Really think through, okay, like we're going to have these variables. These variables are going to be dichotomous. Like what test are we going to use on these variables? And again, that helps you to zero in on the variables of interest that you actually need to study. Because again, if you get a lot of them, you're going to get yourself into trouble. Consult with a biostatistician who knows what they're doing if you have one. Hopefully you have a mentor that knows what they're doing as well. Or if you don't have a biostatistician, hopefully you have a mentor that knows stats pretty well. And again, consult the biostatistician early if you can. Another mistake that I made early on is I designed this like project and I was really excited about it. And then we took all this data to the biostatistician, and he's like, yeah, you should have collected this, that, and the other. And like, this should be in this type of like, you should have coded this way and all this kind of stuff. And again, it just created so much more work on the back end. Whereas if we would have consulted that person early on, we could have probably like prevented a lot of work later. Another thing, and like another thing that gets people into trouble, gets me into trouble sometimes, is like, know who's gonna do the stats and how they're gonna do it before you get started, right? So it's real easy to say like, oh yeah, we'll just do like a linear regression analysis. It's like, okay, do you know how to do that? Like, do you have Stata? Like, have you ever done that before? Do you know if you're doing it right? Like, and if not, like, talk to somebody who does, like, and this is a plug for academics. Like, if particularly if you work with a college of pharmacy, like there's probably somebody there who does have that software that knows how to do that stuff. Hit them up. Like, we like this kind of stuff. We like working with community partners. Like academics, particularly if you've been out of practice for a while, like you kind of lose touch of what the interesting questions are at the bleeding edge. But like, you guys know that stuff. You guys know what those interesting questions are. Whereas the academics, they might know the stats, right? They might be able to help you navigate these different systems. And so it's a really good opportunity for collaboration with your local college of pharmacy. Yeah, so I'd recommend doing that. Again, like I wasn't always in academia. I started out, I worked clinically for like the first 8 years of my career, but I worked really closely with Sid Patanwala, who was in academia. And that dude loves stats, and I like coming up with ideas, and we cranked out a bunch of pubs together. So it worked out really well. All right. So yeah, the other thing is, particularly if you're working with a biostatistician who's not a clinician, is make sure that you guys are on the same page with what you're trying to do. Like, remember, biostatisticians have a PhD in stats. They don't work clinically. And so you may need to explain it at a pretty low level in terms of exactly why you want to do the analysis and the way you want to do it. And they might push back a little bit at first, but again, explain to them like, this is why I want to do this way. This is what we're really trying to achieve there. Make sure they're on the same page with stuff. When it comes to data collection, the hardest thing is just doing it, right? Like, it's like anything, just getting started on data collection is kind of a nightmare because you look at this like overwhelming patient list with like thousands of data elements to pull, and it's like, all right, first one, let's go. Like setting aside time to do it, I think is the most important piece of it, and then actually like sticking to that. Make sure everybody's on the same page, like especially if you're working with students, even residents though, like make sure they know what they're looking for. Make sure they know where you're expecting them to pull that data from, and make sure like they know how they should be pulling it as well. So this is where like a code book can be really helpful, especially if you have multiple people pulling, but even if you have one person. So if you're pulling data and you're putting it into Excel, and then you type yes with a lowercase, and then you type yes with an uppercase, and then you type uppercase Y and lowercase y, it's going to be 4 different instances of the word yes, right? And so when you go back to try to process that data, then somebody's got to go through and clean all that up, and that's a nightmare. You see a lot of heads nodding out there because you've been through this before. Like, if you can keep it clean at the outset, right? Like, there's some tricks you can do in Excel if you're using Excel, so that you have like conditional uh, pre-screening, or like select 1 or 2 things from a drop down, or use something like RedCap that allows you to set these fields in a discrete way. That way you can ensure that it's going to be clean from the outset. The code book again tells you where you can find stuff, and then it tells you what that code means. So if you code something as 1 2 3 4, and then you don't write down what 1 2 3 4 is, but you know it when you're collecting data, so it's fine. And then like you don't look at that for a year and you're like, oh no, like what does this even mean, dude? So write that stuff down somewhere. Code book, super helpful. And then from a journal standpoint, we'd like to see that, particularly if you have multiple people doing the data extraction, it's good to say that like 5 to 10% of those charts got audited early on, in order to make sure that that data was collected in a consistent fashion. And so this also helps you to catch any problems with how students or residents are coding stuff, how they're putting things into the system, if they're pulling things from a weird place. And you might actually learn something. I learned a new way to like a different method for like looking at the same like lab value. One of the residents was like using this funky thing I'd never even seen in Cerner before to look stuff up. I was like, damn, that's pretty cool. But yeah, you might learn something from it too, as long as it's getting the right data. That's what really counts. When doing data collection, how many of you guys use RedCap? Cool. RedCap rules, I like it. It's a little bit hard. I had to watch some YouTube videos to kind of get up to speed on that. But once you figure out the basics of how to set up your tools and stuff, like it's really powerful in terms of allowing you to set up fields so that you're collecting data in a very consistent way. And then if you spend time up front building your RedCap intentionally and smart, so that all your labs are together, anything you're getting out of the node is together, anything you're getting out of like another part of the chart, it's all kind of consistent. And then you can just boom 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 do your data collection really quickly. I like it too because it's got branching logic. So if you're like, oh, did the patient receive vanco? Yes. And then it drops down like, okay, dose, interval, whatever. You can set it up so that like if you don't need those variables, they don't show up, but if you do, it populates. Qualtrics does the same thing. Pretty similar to RedCap in terms of like actual functionality. Qualtrics is a little bit like prettier, I think, on the front end. I think RedCap has some more tools. So again, it's just mostly whatever you have access to and whatever your preference is. I used Excel a lot early on because you have access to it. Everybody has access to Excel, and it can actually do both data collection and some limited functionality in terms of calculations in that. But again, there is the opportunity for stuff to come out a little bit like have some discrepancies in how things are being reported, particularly if you don't put the conditional formatting stuff on there. So Excel's okay, but I think these other tools are a little bit better. The other thing I like about RedCap is you can easily export your data into a format that imports into data analysis software like Stata or SPSS. So that's super nice too. Like another plug for RedCap. They don't pay me, but if they wanted to, I would take it. All right. So again, you can do some statistical testing. You can do some demographic stuff in Excel, pretty basic, a little bit limited in its functionality, but it's reasonable, particularly if you don't have access to